I'm David Sudarma. I'm the Director of Design Engineering at Cru Digital Missions. And I'm here actually with MissionHub, which is a product and innovation from Cru Digital Missions. Yeah, so MissionHub as an app was birthed out of the idea of activating believers onto mission. And so we see small steps of faith that believers can take. Sometimes big steps, sometimes small steps. But each step, when it's intentional and it's driven towards moving somebody towards Christ through their walk, is really what MissionHub is about. So it really encourages believers through these micro steps that they can take and starts to see change in that way. So within the app, MissionHub allows you to identify first where your friend or that person you're reaching out to or caring for, you can start by identifying where they're at in their faith journey. So we've identified 5 different stages. One of those stages could be something like uninterested or maybe just curious about the gospel. Once you've identified that, MissionHub then can start making recommendations for steps of faith you can take with that person. So ways you can care for that person. That could be as simple as engaging in a conversation with them. That could be inviting them to coffee. It could be as safe as praying for that person in your quiet time. So MissionHub is there to journey with you as you journey with the person you care about. One of the core things that we're doing within Cru Digital Mission space is looking for ways to use technology to advance the gospel. But I think that comes not always in very straightforward ways as simply going through a gospel presentation, right? I think that starts from kind of the mindset of caring for somebody. And so when we look at that kind of application, that starts to take a lot of forms. Sometimes that's content. Sometimes that is actions that we're encouraging. Sometimes that's as simple as reminders, right? I think as believers, we often forget. We get busy, we have our lives, but we forget to take those steps. Simple things that we're using to care for others, but sometimes that's really deep, right? Sometimes we're engaging in these deep theological conversations. So I think it's that full spectrum, and I think there's a lot of room to start discovering that. And I think that's the journey that we ourselves are on with MissionHub, is discovering how we can actually be effective in that space. So we're as much as we're trying to help, we're also very much trying to learn and understand and see where the Lord is leading us through all of this. So I think the first thing that you have to identify is what missional living is. So we've identified it at Cru, within our space, we've identified it as taking intentional steps with a person, right? And those steps are being used to communicate and demonstrate the gospel through everyday life. And so I think when you start from that as your framing, we say, okay, there are a lot of good things that I can do with my neighbors and friends. But sometimes I can do those things just kind of in my own right, and they don't really bring a gospel intention to them. And then I can also go kind of on the other spectrum and say, well, I'm going to preach at my neighbor or preach to my neighbor, but not bring these elements of love and care. And so I think missional living really brings the demonstrating component, and it also brings a communication component together where they're both reinforcing one another. You're saying, hey, I'm doing good in the name of Jesus, and I'm not going to let you rest until I give you this ultimate good of Jesus Christ. But then I'm also not going to only be content with giving you that message and no real kind of felt benefit to you. So it's bringing those two things together, I think in very much the same way that Jesus did, where he was meeting physical needs, but also meeting the deepest need of the spiritual component. When you ask a question, what does it mean to inspire generosity? I think within a MissionHub context, which if you step further back is a missional living context, I think that's so much about generosity. It starts first from the gospel, which is the ultimate generosity. Christ died for us, and we're seeking to give that out to the world. And our hope is that other believers across the world would begin to take that and say, we're also going to give that gospel away. The way the gospel starts to display itself is actually in many forms. It looks like practical sharing of maybe generosity through giving time, giving food, giving material possessions, giving all these things away, and then of course giving the spiritual away through the gospel. And so when we think about missional living, our hope is that as believers take this idea and start to share in these very practical ways and ultimately ending up at the gospel, we hope that that will also inspire other believers around them, and it will actually inspire the larger community around them. I think Paul said it best when he was also, I think, very much thinking of Christ when he said, the things that you've heard and seen in me, do. I think ultimately he's saying the things that you've seen in me that are emulating Christ, we're also to do. And so I think that's generosity, is the gospel in many forms. So we've decided to take MissionHub public after realizing that working with MissionHub in a campus context, we started to see success, but we then also saw that these faith steps could really be applied to the church at large. And so our hope is by taking it to a broader audience, to the church, to Christians everywhere, is that we can see many believers activated into missional living.